I get shit done, I have fun. It's my time and I'm the one. I'm breaking through.
Change, so easy, a kid can do it. I'm intrigued by that. I hope you are. We'll be right back. This episode, as you can see, is brought to you by Focal Point. Focal Point is a global organization of some pretty awesome individuals. And today joining me is one of those awesome individuals. So if you have a question for a business coach through the Focal Point channel, you'll get my guest information website near the end of the show, and mine will pop up shortly. So if you have a question you would like to have addressed, shoot it to us. So we'll set up a time to have a complimentary coaching session with you. No strings attached. Send us your questions. So as I say, I'm excited today because one of my colleagues from the Focal Point family is joining me today, and we're going to talk about change so easy a kid can do it. Isn't that exciting? I'm looking forward to hearing what he's going to share with us, because one of the things he's really good at is making change happen. Joel brings 40 plus years of the corporate world that he served as a CFO, a CEO, and operations leadership roles in companies ranging in size from 60 billion to 100 million, pharmaceuticals to consumer product to automotive manufacturing, logistics, and construction. He has traveled the world practicing his skills of improving businesses and their processes, reducing costs in all areas, developing and coaching people, performing acquisition transitions, and driving change. That's really the theme of today on our show. So I'm going to bring Joel Philhours up. And here he is. Hi, Joel.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate it. This is a great opportunity to hang out with you for a while.
So is there anything that I missed in the bio? You're a husband, a father. Any grandkids yet?
I've got 5 granddaughters, raised 2 daughters, or my wife did. I was traveling. But we have 5 granddaughters, 3 here in the town that we live in, which is just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and 2 down in Birmingham, Alabama.
Cool. So today we're going to talk about change. And you came up with that topic because you felt it was something that was important to share with our audience.
You know, I picked change because I've been through it all my life. When I was born, we lived in a farming community in the Boot Heel of Missouri, tiny little town called Hornersville. So small that when I was born, we had to go south across the border into Arkansas, into a town called Leachville, even smaller than Hornersville, but they had a doctor's clinic. So that's where I was born. When I was in the 2nd grade, my dad pulled a Grapes of Wrath kind of move, and we moved to California. So as a 7-year-old, there I was in a pretty big change for a kid that young. And I recall it like it was yesterday, how I was kind of thrown into it. My dad drove out there, and then my mom and brother and I flew out there on a jet plane. So it took us about 4 hours to get there. So in my mind, as a 7-year-old, it really wasn't all that far, except for the change in culture. And I remember working through that as a kid, going from being scared to making friends and getting comfortable again. And that, kind of put me in that realm of understanding change. Sometimes it's thrown on you when you really don't have a choice. So I've dealt with that, with the change subject my entire career. Probably 90% of my career has been around change.
What would be in all of those years of experience of change from a youngster to those C-suite positions you've had, what would be the one or two common things that you've identified or noticed in change amongst others?
Well, you can't fight it. There's no winning in that. You're going to just make yourself and others miserable, and chances are you could just poison the entire well if you take that attitude of I'm not going to do it. Again, I was a bit scared from it. I had spent my first 7 years in a probably 85-mile radius, and here I was in a school, an elementary school that had more students than we had people living in the Hornersville area. So it was one of these things where I could cry and whine about being back on the farm, or I could just deal with the cards that I was dealt and make it work.
Was that something that came natural to you, or is that something that you were taught or mentored, or?
Well, that's a good question. My mother was a good communicator. My father, not so much. He kind of smiled and grunted. You could tell by his face, the mood he was in. But my mother was a tremendous communicator. She was a nurse, and maybe that's where she got this in dealing with patients and such. But she prepared my brother Randy and I we would talk about it. My brother and I were aware of this move like in October of, I believe it was 63 or 64. And she prepared us for what lied ahead. So she talked about, how big California was. We looked at it on the map, which at my age, you really couldn't get the relationship, but I saw where California was. I was excited that we might get to see the ocean and that type of thing. But she prepared us and talked about how we would be leaving our friends, but we would meet new ones and, be some great opportunities, beautiful weather, orange groves and just sunshine 364 days a year. It'd rain one day out of the year kind of thing. So she prepared us and that really helped. So when I hit the ground, I knew that there were going to be new things ahead of me. And I was excited until I was introduced to the class, right? The teacher stood me up there and I was just a country boy. And, at that age, I had no front teeth and wore a crew cut, just a kid. And so I started introducing myself and everybody laughed at the way I talked because I had this Southern drawl. Now that I remember feeling like I was 2 inches tall and that just kind of sucked the wind out of me. So I was pretty sad, pretty scared there for a while.
So there's two nuggets I want to extrapolate on that you said. I think they're poignant. One is the one is what you're just talking about now. So I've had that experience as well, not with a Southern drawl, but with a British accent, a Canadian accent, and
Hey.
called I was an American when I was in the States or in the UK, and at the early stages, I had difficult times with that. So what did you do and to do as that young guy with a funny accent people laughed at? What did you do to overcome that?
I also remember it's the same day. It's that first day was just sticks in my mind like it happened yesterday. The school I left in that little town of Hornersville, we had a cafeteria, the typical, lunch lady, get your tray, get your food and sit down there inside the cafeteria and have your lunch. In California, where the weather's so good, everybody went out to these picnic tables with their sack lunch. And so, I'm out there pretty much alone. I don't recall having like an onboarding partner. I don't think that was quite the vogue back at that time, but I was kind of sitting there all by myself with my sack lunch there. And I remember this girl that was in my class, her name was Laura. And Laura came by, sat down with me with a bunch of her friends and asked me if she could have lunch, sit with me there and be my friend. She introduced me to all of her friends and everything. And that immediately made me feel better because I had someone to talk to. And I knew that that was the thing I wanted most, is to just have friends, to just understand the rhythm of the school, understand, the kids and such. I've always been a guy that had people hanging around. And I felt pretty alone, probably for the first time in my life, Phil, was those first few hours of being in that classroom. And I know that's not a very long time, but it seemed like forever. So
No,
having friends was the best part of making friends.
I want to get the most out of your knowledge in the little time we have. It already down to like 20 minutes left. And can you tie what you learned from that young woman making you feel comfortable? Was there anything there that helped you become the leader that you are today?
Well, I saw how much value that brought, how much of a positive influence it could be on any organization that's going through change. There's nothing worse than making your own story have an ending, because a lot of times we tend to make ourselves, we don't want to be disappointed, so we think about the worst case scenario, and that drives the whole thing south. That makes your attitude terrible. So I realized then that I was going to, if you will, care for anyone that was going through change. Both what my mother taught and what Laura taught me there. That's the way I've handled change my whole life.
Excellent.
And I think
Thank you
that's
for
something
that.
that's carried on.
What I wanted to do, I want to go back to I said there was 2 points, and you brought up the segue to get back to the other point I want to address. I spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars to learn what your mom taught you. And what that was that one of the ways to make change happen is to paint a picture of the possibilities that are out there for us. And your mom was a wizard at this. Maybe it was her nurse training, maybe it was, who knows, but do you find that what your mom put you through, that doesn't sound very good, but in that experience, to be looking forward to with anticipation versus trepidation, was that something that helped you in your leadership?
Absolutely. If again, it's painting the picture for others that maybe they have never gone through a big change. It's putting the positive thoughts in someone's head before they're allowed to start having these negative influences come to mind. It can be overwhelming. I mean, it affects sleep. It affects interaction with others, family. Everything becomes pretty dark if you don't have a positive vision of what's about to happen. It's critical, and I think is the key almost immediately after an organization decides to make a big change, because things leak, word gets out. So I think it's one of those things that I would suggest that a management team do very early.
It's interesting you talk about that. There's a whole bunch of thoughts and questions going through my mind, and one of them is there's 4 things that we don't like to do, and the first one is speak in public. I'm talking generally, and the second is change. And isn't that interesting? The one constant in life is what?
Change.
Change.
That's right.
If we resist it, like you were saying before earlier, it becomes problematic. If you were to adopt some ideas like your mom taught you, or the coaches I've had along the way it was painted to me is, imagine your mom didn't do this. She's a really good example of what to do in a leadership role, is to paint a positive expectation and possibilities. So can you imagine if you had a 4-year-old that was going to go to school, and all of a sudden they're not going to be hanging around with mom and dad and the rest of the people, if they're on a farm, the cows, the cats, the mice. Now they're going to go to school, and they're feeling, oh my gosh, I'm leaving this behind. So they're worrying about what they're leaving behind instead of looking forward. Well, my mentor said, imagine this: if you haven't painted the picture like your mom did for you, this 4-year-old is going to be hanging onto the pant leg of your or your bare leg or the bumper of the car, and you drive away and they're hanging on. They are so fearful, but your mom painted a positive picture. So if you can paint a picture like your mom did, what ends up happening is that they wake up at 4 a.m. before you're even out of bed. They want to go to school. They want to be that big person, right? No, but
That's right.
This sounds very basic and rudimentary, maybe.
And that's why I chose the title is, change so easy, even a kid can do it. Your employees, us grown-ups, us guys that, in my case, that are in the season of life to where I've experienced a lot, I still want someone to provide me comfort with a change. I retired from the corporate world 10, 11 months ago and have gotten into the coaching world. And I've had folks like you and all of Focal Point helping me with the change. And it's so similar to what I went through some, 58 years ago, something like that. It doesn't change. We're all children when it comes to dealing with something new. And we all want to understand the future and what it's going to look like. Takes away the surprises. It really does.
Yes. And you know what? I think we automatically, the way we're wired as human beings is we think about stuff. I mean, everything starts off with a thought. And having a coach, mom, mother, father, higher authority that supports you and understand, maybe have empathy as to what some of the things you might be concerned about, worried about, and help you change the worry into anticipation and looking forward to it. It is a powerful way to make change happen. And whether that be a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or doing like the Grapes of Wrath, if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. It's an interesting story for the journey in some dire times and dire straits, and how people across the U.S. started out in Oklahoma, right? And went to California.
Arkansas.
It started in Arkansas. Well, I apologize. I knew there was a K in it.
Yeah. One thing I want to add is when I would come home from school on those early days there in California, my mom would check in with me and ask me how it went, right? Hey, did you meet some new friends today? How's your teacher? How's this, that, and the other? So she allowed me to either, not cry, but talk to her about the things that I didn't think were going well. But for the most part, it was an opportunity to talk about the things that were going well. She was very encouraging. She was very interested, obviously, because I was her kid. But management needs to be just as concerned about their people that are going through changes that was put upon them, right? I wasn't part of the decision, just like a lot of employees aren't part of the decision as it relates to a reorganization or a merger, that type of thing, is not only teach them or tell them up front what's going on, but then check in with them. Don't just leave them alone, because some people are going to struggle with it and they may need some longer term comforting or at least information on what's going on and how they can help to make things flow a little smoother.
So in the 40 plus years of being in the leadership roles and being a father, a husband, a grandfather, and all the many hats you've worn, are there tactics or strategies that we could introduce to our audience that you wouldn't mind sharing?
I don't mind. I think you've got to have some patience. You've got to set expectations with yourself as well as with with those that you're in charge of or that you have charge of. Communication is critical. And again, people can, go through different phases during a change. They can feel good one day and then feel a little bit scared the next day. And it's going to change. It's going to be different for every person. And I think, again, having that patience, having that expectation of people coming in and out of feeling good about it, it's going to be there for a while. And that it is I think it's good to share with people that change is the only constant, as you said, Phil. It's something that for the most part will always take place, hopefully, because change is generally a move that's made to get stronger. It's a move to grow the business or to increase market share, change direction of the strategy. It's generally a good thing, and I think it's one that if we understand that change is going to be here, and that the internet is a good thing. If some people still fight technology and such, it's okay to learn. It's okay to relaunch where you are as a business person or as an employee. It's good to learn, and I think if people get that mindset early, they're gonna be able to deal with change and probably be more successful in their careers.
Yeah, those are really good points. So good. I went off. Well, I was on camera, but I just added that banner. This was not premeditated. Only 30 seconds ago, when you were providing that wisdom, I want to make sure that we don't miss out on that. I added the look forward to, as your mom is a sponsor of this, because that's what she helped you do, right? She helped you look forward to the changes that you're going through. No matter what was going on in her life, maybe she was worried, but I'm getting the sense that she didn't pass that on to you. She passed on the possibilities to you. And I think that shows up in the man that I've got to know over the last few months, that's kind of where you are as well.
Right. And I looked at change as a part of developing myself and my career. Out of those 40 years, Phil, 30 years of that were spent in new roles, new positions, positions that were created that I stepped into, with the biggest one being part of a team that moved the financial services out of New York City into Memphis for a pharmaceutical company. You're talking about a big change. I mean, it was big for us here in the Memphis, Tennessee area, and of course, big for the folks that were being repurposed there in New York City. But that was my first big role to where I had a hand in creating the change. While I was there, we did a couple of acquisitions to where I participated and led in the transition of these acquisitions, and on it went. And I've spent, again, the last 30 or so years of my career being involved in actually driving the change and making it happen. So I guess I kind of looked at it from the standpoint, if change is going to be here, I'd rather be on the leading side of it and make it happen, as opposed to being what some people would call the victim side of it and having to change. I got to help design it, and that's a lot of fun, I'll tell you. You're mute.
That's what I brought you along for, is to come on my back. I was coughing in the background. I forgot to turn the mic back on.
That's okay.
So I put those three words up there: problem, challenge, and opportunity, because often it really sets or gives you an idea. It's almost like a litmus test as to where you are, or the people you're working with, or you're trying to lead. If they see everything as a problem and not focused on a solution, then you actually have a different kind of situation. So I guess situation is another word we could include in that stream of words. But if we start out with, okay, initially, moving to California as a youngster could be a problem because of all those reasons. Now you can turn it into a challenge. What will I do, become, or have experience-wise because of that? And then turn that into the opportunity of learning how to speak like a surfer dude instead of a guy from Arkansas. Right? I mean, I'm just making fun of that in life.
No, that's exactly right.
It could be any of those things, right? So I mentioned that I'm originally from England, went back and forth as a youngster. And as a youngster, change is easier. We're more malleable than as we get older. So there's more effort that's required to make change happen often for us older
Right.
folk. I think after age 7 or so, change starts to become more difficult for most of us. But being called an American when I'm a Brit and I'm actually was living in Canada, and I didn't want to go. I was an angry little boy at 9. I knew we would be coming back in 12 months. I was right. But my mom was doing the best she could for us as a family unit. And my angst around that was, well, my mom was upset because I beat the vicar's son up because I think he said something about, he called me a Yank. No offense, my friends in America, but it's not who I am. So I wanted to be
I get
identified
it.
with who I thought I was.
I get
But
it.
those things have allowed me to identify in myself and others that, sometimes when I saw it, I guess, as a problem. And eventually, as an adult, I grew into seeing things as an opportunity. So what we've just recently had to go through, i.e. the COVID, we're still kind of in it. But it allowed me to make lemonade out of the lemons that were thrown our way at COVID. And that doesn't
Right.
mean that I thought it was a great experience, or nor do I think it is. However, what I do like, and I don't know if this is your experience, is it afforded me to learn some things about myself, meet some incredibly interesting people around the globe, because we all came back to the internet using that. That's where I found them. I'm friends with some really cool and interesting people in a variety of different
Right.
countries. And without the internet and without the impact, the problem, the challenge, there would have been no opportunity. Would you have a parallel story or something that kind of supports what I just babbled on about?
Well, I stay in touch with all of my, not all, probably 20 or so of my friends that I grew up with in California. I was out there from the 2nd grade through the 10th grade. What's interesting is when I was just finishing up my sophomore year in high school, my grandfather asked my dad if he wanted to come back and take over the farm. So as a 16-year-old, I'm back in Arkansas. I went from initially being called Jethro Bodine, and that's for the folks that can remember a sitcom called The Beverly Hillbillies. Jethro was the one of the characters in that, and so they made fun of my accent by calling me Jethro. And now at 16, I moved back to Arkansas, and yes, they did call me Surfer Dude and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of went through it again.
Right.
I stay in touch with all of my friends that I grew up. Those were my formative years of, elementary school, junior high, and a couple of years of high school. And then, of course, I've got a bunch of friends I stay in touch with that I went to high school and college with in Arkansas. So technology does allow us to remain friends with those that we have left. And it also allows us to introduce. I've introduced my California friends with my Southern friends. So I've created what I think is a better world by introducing people, and we've become a bigger group of friends. That second move I think might have been a little bit harder than the first move as a 16-year-old, because you think you're kind of grown up at that point in time. I'll admit, my mom didn't really give me a lot of prep work and such. She stayed in California with my brother, as he only needed about 3 or 4 more months to graduate from high school. So he stayed, my mom and my brother stayed. And so it was just my dad and I was learning how to farm. That kind of took up my time, and started getting into sports. Once I get into sports, I'm pretty good. I relax and make friends easily there.
What's one thing that you would offer up as a nugget for our audience to help them deal with change, allowing them to learn from a kid
Okay.
to an adult? Just a
All right.
really quick sum up.
I think if you look at change as basically has kind of 3 components to it. It's hardest at the beginning. It's very messy while you're going through it. So it's messy in the middle, but it's best at the end. Once you get the rhythm, once you get some comfort with it, and you realize you're not going to die from this change, and that there is a better world after the change, I think that it's much easier to deal with it. Just expecting that. Hard at the beginning, messy in the middle, and gets easier at the end. You will survive it.
And as I promised, and that was great, Sage information. Thank you for that, and all of the other valuable information you shared in the short bit of time we had today. If you have a question for a business coach from Focal Point, you have two options. You can go to Joel. There's a website there and his email and contact information. Have a chin waggle with him. He's an entertaining, interesting guy. 40 years of managing change. Actually, probably more than that if you go back to his childhood. And he's been mentored by some of the best, starting off with the foundational, his mom. And if you would like to talk to somebody who has a Canadian accent, my contact information is right there as well. Joel, it was a pleasure and an honor and a treat to have you on for a short few minutes.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
So if you're watching this on the replay, put hashtag replay and let us know where you're from. If you have a question for a business coach, or if you know of anybody that would have a story that you felt needs to be heard around the globe, make an introduction. Let's have them on the Business Renovator and share their story, and we can all learn from them. One last thing from one of my mentors from many decades ago. I just want to bring this up to remind you guys about you and how, I got too many things going on here. The you is larger in wonderful because you are wonderful and you are unique. Now go act like it.
I get shit done, I have fun. It's my time and I'm the one. I'm brave.